Right, I'm back. I forgot to mention that I just obviously had my hair done. So it's everyone's always like comments because it looks very different when it's straight, but it'll just be until I wash it. Then it'll go back to its normal wild mane-like thing, which I always find so funny how my hair has become curly like a mane. And remember that the rising sign, and in my case that's Leo, is very much about how we show up in the world, how we rise into the world, and our bodies. So Leos are often known for having some kind of a mane issue, whatever that may be. And my hair used to be straight and it started to go curly. And I feel like it's also a lot to do with the more I embodied this part of myself, really, mostly unconsciously. Anyway, here we are to talk about the astrology of it all and looking at how Uranus impacts us in our chart. So oh my goodness, make a new folder. Sorry, it's just asking me to I don't know if you can see this, but other previous recordings just popping up and I'm trying to get rid of it. It's popping up again. Okay, I think I've got rid of it now. Okay, apologies for that. So like Pluto, Uranus is the same slow-moving transpersonal planet. So, and I know you might find me repeating myself a lot, but I think it's really important to just reinforce. So when we talk about our personal planets in astrology, we're talking about Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars. They are the personal planets. They cover the personality stuff, the more tangible in our day-to-day. Then we talk about the gas giants, who we covered now with Jupiter and Saturn, and they are not the same sort of personal. They're kind of grandfathery energies that are a little bit further out there, that expansion and contraction. One brings in a lot of expansion and luck and joy and moreness and the inhale. And then the other one is more contraction, the exhale, discipline, slow down, focus kind of energy, which is Saturn. So we have that Jupiter-Saturn energy. And then very next out in that order of planets is Uranus. And Uranus was discovered in 1718, I believe. I'm not the best with dates, but I think it was 1718. So he was the first planet discovered outside of our visible, our ability to see with the naked eye. So once we developed the telescope, we started looking further out, and that's how we've continued to find more and more things out there in space, because we have the capacity to with our new equipment. So remember that Saturn used to be the furthest out planet. And if we're talking about Hellenistic astrology, which is your ancient astrology or traditional astrology, that's as far as we went. We went as far as Saturn. He was the main boundary. And remember, Jupiter is inside of Saturn. So Saturn becomes this boundary that Jupiter can't quite go past. Beyond Saturn, they don't have those same boundaries. So those transpersonal planets have these kind of crazy energies. Another interesting thing about Uranus is he orbits on his side. So let's say all the other planets are doing this around, or Earth's going around them as well, but around the sun, okay? Uranus is going sideways. He also actually has rings, but he moves on his side. So can you see he's like already quirky? And he has a little bit of a strange orbit as well, not quite as outrageous as Pluto. Sorry, could you close that for me? Thank you. Sorry, Ella's doing her homework here. Not quite as outrageous as Pluto. You'll remember that we've talked about how Pluto, because of his unusual orbit, doesn't spend the same amount of time in a sign. So we can say Jupiter spends about 1 year in every sign, and without fail, it's about 1 year. Saturn is about 2.5 years. The sun is 1 year, not in a sign, 1 year as a revolution, sorry. So 1 month, he spends 1 month in a sign. But where it comes to Pluto, he's just moved into Aquarius, where he's going to be for 20 years. And he was in Capricorn for 15 years. So you can see it vacillates there. It's more consistent with Uranus. He spends about 7 years in a sign, but 7 years, I mean, that is a long time. It's actually, it's a Saturn square. So Saturn will do a quarter of the circle in the time that it takes Uranus to do the one sign. His full orbit is about 84 years. And the midpoint of his full orbit, which is the opposition, when you're born, he's here, and he travels around when you get to here. That is pretty much 44 years, 43, 44 years on the nose, just about. And it's often known as the midlife crisis transit. So that was pretty much the exact time that my marriage fell apart. That is often the kind of thing that would happen at that point. So we may look at Uranus as being a higher expression of Mercury. He's quite a mental guy in more ways than just one. He's intellectual, but he's got no boundaries. Now, remember that Mercury is really close to the sun. So Mercury, there's a lot of boundary points for Mercury, and Mercury goes a little bit more like the details, the small, the fine, beginner mind. How do I puzzle that out? Uranus is like, expand your thinking, go out there. Who says you need to orbit this way? Why not orbit this way? You know, like he's a bit crazy and quirky. Quirky is a key word for Uranus. Unusual, revolutionary, all of these kinds of things, very similar energy to Aquarius. And that is why we're focusing on him this month, because this new moon that we're working with is the Aquarius new moon. But what's also interesting about Aquarius is remembering that Uranus was our first new planet. So now when he first came into being, did I say Aquarius? Uranus was our first new planet, our modern planet. And when this first modern planet came, they'd already given rulership. Remember, we've discussed the rulership of what planet rules what sign. All the signs had been given rulership already. So now here comes this new planet. And what's always been very interesting, if you look back historically, is when planets were found, it was always interesting when they were found. Like that one was found, Uranus was found, if I remember correctly, and I'm not great with dates in history, but I think between the American War for Independence and the French Revolution. And he's known for revolutions and these kind of freedom fighting kind of things. This is when he was found. And this is the energy that began to integrate into societies in different parts of the world, even as we began to integrate Uranus. Before that, we probably weren't, he was still there. I mean, just because we didn't see him didn't mean he wasn't there. But it's like we weren't ready to expand beyond the boundaries of Saturn, even in terms of our psyche. So even though he was still there, and we can look further back in history and say, well, even though we didn't know Uranus was there, he was at this point when this was going on. And you can see that Uranus was at play even before we as society started to understand and integrate. But when the planet was discovered, the integration began. And over time, the integration becomes greater and greater. So initially, some astrologers probably weren't really interested in working with Uranus. But over time, now every astrologer is going to look at Uranus, you know, and it's the same things that are being discovered now that people are like, oh, I don't know, Chiron, I don't know how to work with Chiron. He's not a standard part of my practice. But as time goes on, Chiron's becoming more and more popular, more and more common, because collectively we're managing to integrate those energies. So now it's like before you knew you had an ear, you might not have known you needed an ear, but once you've got that, you have to bring that into part of your life. You can't just be without your ear. And that's kind of what happens as we integrate the planets. So at the moment, Uranus is in Taurus. He's getting towards the end of his stay in Taurus. But what I wanted to say about Aquarius is, because he didn't have a rulership, over time, at one point, they gave Uranus to Scorpio. And then Pluto, when Pluto was discovered quite a while later, and I think it took them a while to decide where does Uranus go. And anyway, they gave him to Pluto, to Scorpio, but then when Pluto came in, it was like, oh, no, this is Scorpio stuff, this. So anyway, ultimately they decided to give rulership, or you might say co-rulership, to Aquarius. So Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, and we covered that last month. Saturn rules both Capricorn and Aquarius. And traditional astrologers, Hellenistic astrology, they won't even look at Uranus as an option. But a lot of more modern astrologers, depending on your school of belief, will look at least as a co-ruler. If not, there is also a school of astrology, in fact, called Uranian astrology. I don't know much about it, but I would assume that they take Uranus very seriously just by the name. So what happens is we have to decide where that falls for us. Me, being a Gemini, I can't say out with Saturn, in with Uranus, or I'm sticking with Saturn, I'm not interested in Uranus, because that's just not my modus operandi. So for me, I believe in a co-rulership concept. And we've already seen this before with Mars being the ruler of the modern ruler, the traditional ruler of Scorpio, and Pluto being the modern ruler of Scorpio. So I take that stance as well. I won't do away with Saturn, but I do look at Uranus. And this is where Aquarius is also interesting, because I actually first learned it as Uranus's sign, and that made complete sense to me. Everything Uranus stands for is so Aquarian to me. The sudden changes, the big thinking, the out of the box thinking, the quirkiness, the being prepared to really fight for what you believe in, but in shock tactics, so lightning bolts, that sort of thing. But then again, as I started to understand Saturn's work in the sign of Uranus, listen to me, Saturn's work in the sign of Aquarius, I could see that too, because Aquarius is fixed air. It's not mutable and all flexible. It's not cardinal and leading the show. It's very like, this is what I want to do for the future. This is what I'm trying, and they like fixating kind of energy. Fixed energy is quite like disciplined, almost like excessively disciplined, a bit more rigid. And there is that of all three air signs, that is definitely more Aquarian than, say, Gemini. Gemini is mutable air with the hands moving and all over the place, can't choose between things. I don't think you know anyone like that at all. But yeah, so I think that they both have a space in the sign of Aquarius. This Aquarius season is very, very powerful because Pluto has just moved into Aquarius. He's at the 0 degree, that seed point. And as I'm filming this today, Mercury is stepping in to meet him, and this will be Mercury's first visit with Pluto in the sign of Aquarius, first of 20, because he's going to be doing this for 20 years, Pluto is. And then next week, we're going to have Mars come and meet up with Pluto in Aquarius for the first time. And then we're going to have Venus come, and these are personal planets, remember? So looking at how this impacts you is going to be exceptionally powerful, because it's giving you a taste of things to come for your Pluto in Aquarius journey. Remembering all the things we learned about Pluto being about power, power dynamics, power plays, power shifts, empowering, disempowering, transforming, etc. So this is a very powerful thing, and it's in a sign that is ruled by both Saturn and Uranus. So whilst Pluto is traveling through Aquarius, we always are going to look at what is the condition of Saturn, because he's in charge of Pluto right now, or of Uranus, because he's in charge of Pluto right now. So that also brings another stance to something. And if this is something you don't quite understand, remember to point it out in the Zoom, because that is a concept I'm only just starting to drop in for you. I want to share my screen quickly and just show you our, here we go, our worksheet bits. So here's Uranus. This is the glyph for Uranus. It's a little extra stylized, this one. And I always kind of call it a stylized H. So it's almost like an H with slightly curly edges and a line and a dot. It doesn't have to be quite as curly as this guy, but you'll see it on your chart and you'll see what it looks like. And when I do the next chart, and then Uranus says, I revolutionize, I shock, I shift paradigms, I break down to break through. I am a freedom fighter. He rules Aquarius, which is quirky, nonconformist, futuristic, and community-driven and intelligent. So that's a little breakdown of that planet. My Uranus story, you're going to put in your Uranus sign. Remember, like Pluto, this is a generational planet. The time period is obviously less. And the one we have to do next is Neptune, and the three modern planets are Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So next month we do Neptune. Excuse me. So you're going to look where your Uranus sign is. You're going to look where the house is. This is important. Planets aspecting Uranus. Now, what's so nice is you guys are knowing what I'm talking about when I say things like that now. I see so much growth in everybody. My generational Uranus culture around the sign. So Uranus is like a trend-setting kind of energy, like where things change in art, things change in music, things change in decor. This is where we start to see Uranus. And oftentimes, as the Uranus sign shifts, we're going to see this trend towards something new. So it's like the fringe as trends are coming in. So for example, if we were to use an example of where Uranus is now, he's in a sign that he's not at his best in. He doesn't love being in Taurus, to be honest with you. He prefers Scorpio, which is opposite to Taurus. And we can remember that because he once, for a while, he had a sojourn or a tenure as the ruler of Scorpio. So he doesn't mind Scorpio, okay? And so he doesn't love the opposite sign, just like we now give him Aquarius, so he doesn't love Leo, okay? So remembering that up to Saturn, we have a stronger thing of dignity and debility. Like this way I'm saying, loves this, doesn't like that. That's the more official words, dignity and debility. But the modern planets don't quite have the same take on it as that, but still to a degree do have certain places they are more comfortable and less comfortable. So at the moment he's in a sign he's less comfortable in. And yet, if we were to try and look at it from a cultural perspective, what started trending, for example, when Uranus moved into Taurus? Oh, just trying to remember when that was. I maybe want to say 2017 or 18, thereabouts. And I think we're moving out next year. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Yeah, that's about right. I think it might have been 18. Anyway, so when he started to move in there, what we did see a rash of, bearing in mind that he is all about technology, innovation, movements forward, but Taurus is grounded, is nature, is the sensory world, is slow and steady, quite different. You can see why Uranus is kind of a little stifled in Taurus, because it's quite hard to shift a Taurus energy. But what we started to see is a lot of people in the rat race, busy, technology-driven, high-rise building city spaces, a lot of young people started trending to move out to small holdings, to start growing their own food, to start thinking about how to be more sustainable with the planet. And for me, that is such a classic example of one of our Uranian lessons that we've had with Uranus and Taurus. And if you look back through history, you'll see what was that for me. You could even Google it if you're feeling a bit unsure. But in order to get that feeling of it, you'll say, what was happening in arts and culture kind of thing? Because Uranus has a lot to do with that, arts and culture, new ideas, new paradigms. What was happening around that between the years of this and this? So Google it. Start using your own software. So that's the best place to find that is the ephemeris in AstroSeek. I've shown you how to use it. If this is starting to overwhelm you, remind me and we'll do it in the Zoom. But you go to the ephemeris and you check when was Uranus. Okay, for me, it's in Scorpio. I have a natal Uranus in Scorpio. I can put in the dates. When was Uranus in Scorpio? And it's going to pop that up for me. And I can go, okay, between here and here. Then I can go to Dr. Google and say, what was the trends around art or culture or music? What genres were coming up? What, and just play with it. And so you're going to get an understanding of your generational Uranus culture stuff. And then what house represents my Uranus opposition? So I'm going to show you that when we go to my astrology now. And do I feel more connected to Saturn or Uranus? Because remember, they both have co-rulership over the sign of Aquarius. Depending, especially if you have any planets or points in Aquarius, then it's going to be more obvious in how you enact your Aquarian parts. Okay, so we're going to do another little short video as we check out my chart for an example.